I'm sorry. I'm afraid I can't do that. This sort of thing has cropped up before, and it has always been due to human error. Has the mission been completed? You know that I have the greatest enthusiasm for it.
Alright, welcome back to the Sloppy Modeler, starting work on the Moebius Space Odyssey 2001, or 2001, A Space Odyssey Moonbus. And essentially what, just real quick work, I wanted to start a test fit of these parts, and what I've done is I've actually put together the floor, or the sub-chassis, and then put together the the door by adding the door on the inside, the door panel detail there, which is really nice, and then snapping in the rear of the door and the rear panel here, as you can see, putting all that together. So we'll talk about the test fit here a little bit. The instructions say, and this actually needs to probably come out this way. There we go. The instructions tell you to glue in this base out of the gate, and then on the next page to glue in these interior panels once you've got the seats and all that other stuff in. Now, if you're going to light this particular model, I think the only way to do that is to put some light behind this and do a quick Raytheon effect underneath this panel right here, and leave that white. I think that's the only way to get any light into the back of this unit. Putting it into the top is just it's not really feasible unless you build a false top here, and I might do that yet, but we'll see. So let's look at the challenge of putting this together. So essentially, you've got the sub-chassis, or the bottom of the model, and then you've got the back door, and then you've got this panel here that goes in, and I just put that in with some Plasti-Weld. Same with that side there, that goes in, and I will say this, the seams are going to be really nice by the time you get a coat of primer on there and just a little bit of sand. You're going to have a really nice base of that model. It's not going to be a problem. If you go ahead and glue this bottom piece in, prior to putting these pieces in here, it becomes a real significant challenge to get these to go into where they need to go. Especially if you've already painted these pieces, there's just not a lot of room to do that. And the way that these are put together here, they fit into these three slots. They fit into the slots here and here and here. So putting that in after this is in is a significant challenge. So I have determined that through early test fitting that I can build most of this up with the interior detail and so forth, and then place it in after I've got some lighting in the base here. And I might do Raytheon lighting here. So what that means is not priming the bottom of this at all, not light blocking it, but rather taping it off. Same thing in here, not taping this off and leaving that white or silver, leaving this white, all this floor white. And I might just leave it white and let the light come up and let that run. But so I wouldn't light block that at all. So essentially what you've got, and let me get the right number here, that's 6. Let's find part number 7. Here we go. So essentially what I recommend doing is putting these parts in, and by doing so you actually have the ability to put that in and make it fit. And I would put those in first and maybe put some lighting in underneath there, or do the same thing here where, again, not light blocking that, but leaving that in. And I'm going to do some experimentation with some styrene. Same thing on this side here. You insert that piece of styrene into those slots, And then once that's in, once the test fit is in, bear with me, there we go. Now we're in, and essentially you could glue that up. You can seal up that back, you can seal up the back here, where again that fits really nice. You can see there's virtually no light coming through that seam. Using a little bit of pressure and some Plasti-Weld, you'll be able to seal that right up after painting this back piece. Right now I can pull it in and do all the detail and then tape it off and leave it at such. Then put these pieces in, glue them in, or do whatever lighting you're going to do underneath. And again, I haven't determined that, but that's something that's next. Once that is in, then it's just simply a matter of putting this in by dropping. You can see the slot here where that tab goes. So you've got a slot right there. Once you put that slot in, you can basically drop the back by putting that slot together, a little bit of pressure, and then it drops right in on the locator pins, and that is the base that's in, and then you can push that together. So there might be room for a little bit of lighting in here. Again, I'm not sure. I think I'm going to use the Raytheon lighting effect for the base of that. I was hoping to put some lights in behind here, and you know, the coloring on that, though, if you look at the box, they have this 1970s or 1960s green in there. And so what you might have, if you play this right, okay, so you've got this green here on top from that piece here, which would be this section here. What you might be able to do is use Raytheon lighting, where you don't light block the back of that, and you don't light block the back of that, and leave that white. And I mean pure white, so that light comes through. And then once that's in, you've got the ability to put your lights in behind there, put this down, and if I do a Raytheon on the center, and then the green on these outsides, they've got a silver floor that goes the length of it in here, and maybe I can take a look at, I'll paint up some styrene with some silver and then see how light goes through that. The problem is silver reflects light or bounces it around, and it acts as a light block all by itself. So this is going to be a real significant challenge to lay this in, but you know, we're gonna hopefully rise to the challenge and see if we can get some lighting. The other piece here that you want to take a look at when you work through this is, here's the interior of the front cockpit, and what happens is that this fits in, and this was, I was having a little difficulty with this earlier even. This fits in, not like that, but like this. And once that's in, you do have, this is kind of a poor fit. There's no slots, basically. It just kind of has butt joints as you go. You can see there finally, there's the butt joint that lines up, but there's not really a slot, and that's going to be something that you want to be really careful because if you paint this piece here, paint the cockpit, outer cockpit, and then put this piece in that's been painted a flat black as you have in the instructions, you want to leave this white lip white, or the color of your hull, whatever you're going to do. So putting that in with any degree of clarity without getting glue all over the place, and then having it match up and not have a seam there where you might see, you see you've got a seam there. All of those things are part of the test fit of how I'm going to put this together from a perspective. And then the same thing you can see from the front. If you have that down there carefully, you do have a bit of a seam there. So all of that will glue together. So I'm not sure how to proceed with that. What I might do is just glue this up as it sits, glue it up already, and then spend some masking this, or just doing it with a brush, doing hand painting, or paint it first, glue it in, and then go back and do some touch-up paint on the interior. So that's going to be a challenge to put through it. So again, my recommendation is to lay in these sides, parts 6 and 7, first, And then once you've got this painted the way you want it, you can literally drop it in. Same thing once you've got the inner hull put together. You can drop that in, and then once you've got that done, then now you're starting to look like a Moonbus, at least from the aft portion here. And I think this is going to come together. I can't stress enough the importance of that test fitting. If I had just started gluing these in according to the instructions, I would have been kind of sunk on how to move this ahead. So just working on the outer section first, and then working inward, and then adding the lighting as we go, will make a difference on that. So just little things like that. I'm not sure how that seam is going to come together. Right now, it looks like I've got to do some cleanup, or there's just a piece here that it's going to take some pressure first to pull all this together, and then get the paint to go on. Again, it's a nice model. The fit is really quite nice. These seams were just perfect. Just a little bit of Plasti-Weld, and once you get primer on there, all that'll disappear. A little sanding, and you're running. And then I'll have to do some research on how to paint the bottom of that hull with that superstructure. You can see here with that structure how to actually paint that, and either highlight that detail or just let it blend in, and use the rather deep pockets here, or the deep styrene mold to cast lighting and give enough contrast there. So we'll proceed with putting this together. We'll probably do the landing gear next. That you can glue up and paint and set aside. And there really isn't room in here for any kind of battery that I can see. So I'm going to have to determine a way to build some kind of base or stand. And I might go with the polar lights stand that I've got, and you've got a perfect spot right here to drill a hole and put a pole through there, and get this elevated on a polar light stand, and then run down to a battery inside the base of the polar light stand. So we'll proceed, and when we come back, we'll have some more update. Thank you. Hey, welcome back to the Sloppy Modeler. Work progresses on the 2001 A Space Odyssey Moonbus, and I've essentially got mocked up here, just kind of press fitted the base and the actual Moonbus itself. I've got the windows here that will have to be painted. Actually, that's the back frame, and then I've got the cargo containers are glued up, along with gluing up all of the suspension pieces, and that's what these 9 pieces are. These 6 here, that's all the suspension work. These are the interiors to the thrusters. And I'm actually, again, kind of amazed at how all this comes together. Those actually will fit in like so. And then what you'll see is you've got this area in here that will be painted. I'm going to paint the interior black so it looks like the inside of a rocket, and then the photo etch parts or the resin parts, one of the two, give you much closer thruster pieces for these sides for the rockets. Again, I'm not going to go to that level, and I don't think I'm even going to light them. I believe it goes like this. Here's probably a closer spot, yeah, as it goes up. So, however, I will paint the interior of that black and the interior of this side black, while the outside will be, of course, that main color of the hull. So the way I paint and prime, just a couple of things that I do. Number one is I always paint primer on the side that's not going to be seen or faced first. So the backs of all the chairs, and then the tops of these, which are essentially covered up by these big pieces. The interior of the rockets, which will be black, flat black at some point. And for the most part, anything else here that's not going to be seen, I typically spray the backs of those with primer first, just so that they're ready to go. And then if there's any runs or anything in the primer, when you flip it over, you can see it, sand it out, and then spray it. And that way, if you do happen to have a run or a glob of primer, which you hope you don't, it's typically on a spot where it's not seen, and you're ready to paint on the next stretch. And similarly, I do the same thing when it comes to paint. The other thing I do with these small parts is basically just tape some painter's tape and flip it around, and with just like you've seen here, where it's taped down, and then there's the adhesive side is facing up, and that just keeps these parts from flying all over the place when you're using any kind of spray primer. I do like the Duplicolor car primer. It's a sandable primer, comes in white, dark gray, and black. And you know, I know a lot of you guys swear by Vallejo primers and all that stuff, but when I use that primer, it just seems paint sticks to it, and that primer sticks to the models. And sometimes I use an adhesive promoter, also by Duplicolor, and that works nicely. So, you know, there are a lot of options for paint, a lot of options for different items of use when it comes to this kind of stuff. However, like I said, I like the Duplicolor spray paints, and then the rest I use airbrush colors, as you've seen with all the other things that are in place there. Detail looks pretty nice. I did take the time. I sanded the bottoms of all of these, and what basically did is I have my sanding stick, just ran across the bottom and the tops and sides, because again, you won't be able to see this seam here because it's basically going to be invisible under the model, but if you turn it over, you'll just see a smooth spot under there. So for right now, what I'm going to do is go primer these up, probably primer some of the larger pieces that are ready to go, that aren't going to be impacted by the light blocking I'm going to do. And we'll get that primered up, and then we'll come back, and once it's primered, and then we'll take a look at what needs to be light blocked and what needs to be Raytheon lighting. And once the Raytheon lighting is taped off, then I can primer and light block, and then we'll be ready to put the lights in and basically just get started. So this is just really the first day of build, and the easy little small parts are all kind of laid out here. I haven't done the figurines. Those will probably come at a later time. I just don't like messing with those because the parts get lost and so forth if you're not careful. So I'd rather have those right to the end, and then once they're done, put them right into the model at that point. So right now we'll take a break, and we will go get some of this stuff primered. When we come back, we'll talk about where we're going to Raytheon light block the model itself, hopefully to get some lighting into there. Thank you. Hey, welcome back to the Sloppy Modeler. Had a little bit of success in the other room. Paint is there. The primer is drying on the hull and a lot of the other parts and so forth. What you're looking at are two parts that go into the inner walls of the cockpit. They're kind of matched in like this, and there's not much detail on those inner walls. Essentially, basically this two doors, and I'm going to try and light those. So what I've done is I've taped the outside here, and we're going to leave these white as much as possible. And then the cockpit, inner cockpit, let's see if we've got a color on that, probably. Yeah, so the inner cockpit, as you can see, is a lot of silver, and these are green. So what I'm going to do is, and you can see the green here and here at the same time. So you've got that green in there, and so that's these two panels is what I'm talking about. And they look just like lockers, but I think to get a little more light into the front end of this, that's what I'm going to do is put some light behind that. And there's room, so I can put in SMD or some LED tape, one strand of LED tape in behind both of these and make that happen. So the big challenge, of course, was to make this impregnable to light, and I'm going to do that by spraying the back of this with a black. Just black primer, a couple coats of black primer, and then a coat of white. Same thing here, black primer with a couple coats of white over the top of it. And then this I can just do a white primer and then spray it the color of that green. And actually I think I'm going to have to search out that color of that green because that might be a challenge. Then what I've done, and this is a total utter crapshoot, so we're going to see what comes of it. I have in a little tiny bottle here the detailer liquid mask, and that's what it looks like. And what I did is it comes in a regular bottle like that, and you know, it's hard to work with even with a brush. So what I did is I went to my hobby shop and found this fine line applicator with a super fine tip, and it's kind of like your glue tip. But basically I poured the mask in there, and then was able to use this, and I just dropped across the top of all of those 1 drop of this liquid mask. And after that has a chance to dry, I might put 1 more coat on and then do the same thing. But I'm only going to spray the back of, or the front of this with primer, with black primer, and the back I'm going to just leave without any primer at all. Black primer here, and then silver over the black primer, and then hopefully at the end of that, then what we'll be dealing with is we'll be able to peel off this liquid mask in the purple here, peel off this liquid mask in the purple, and that will break that away, break away the primer and the silver away, and it should leave that permeable to light. On top of that, then what I'll do is some of the individual buttons I'll paint with, red, yellow, green, blue, and some other things as we go around it. So we'll see if that's able to pass that light through. This was just basically holding that up to the light to make sure that I had both of those sets of tapes in the right place, and now we're ready to prime that as well. So we're having a lot of fun with this. Really, it is a challenging, effort to put in the right lighting and the right look, and I still don't even know if I'm going to get quite there all the way, but we'll figure this out as we go, and I'll let you in on both the ups and the downs. So for now, this is the Sloppy Modeler signing off.